Is the game finally up for Prince Harry and Meghan's Netflix deal? Are William and family breaking a royal travel protocol? And whose leg shocked Queen Camilla this week? We've got another fascinating show for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential. I'm Jo Elvin, and on today's panel is the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English, back from her break, and the Mail's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. Now, regular viewers, you will know what I'm about to say. I'm sorry, but yes, if you don't already, we would love you to subscribe to this channel. Join the more than 467,000 of you who already do. It doesn't cost anything, but it does guarantee you're notified whenever we put out a new show. So earlier this week, we put out a new episode of Reading the Royals, where Richard looked at Catherine's year in recovery. If you missed it, it will play straight after this, and I really recommend you watch. It's very moving. We also have more Reading the Royals coming for you next week, and if you want to be notified, you'll need to press that subscribe button. Right, let's get to my panel. Rebecca, welcome back.
Thank you. I mean, thankfully I didn't miss much while I was away, so all's well that ends well.
Absolutely nothing happened in royal life.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll get to that. But let's first of all talk about Queen Camilla, who got quite a shock when a royal fan showed her a bit of leg this week.
I tell you, I got a bit of shock when he showed me his leg as well.
You loved it.
I actually, and I'm not saying this to get out the violins, because I only got back into the country very late on Tuesday night. Didn't go to bed and had to get out the house by 5 a.m. in the morning to get to Norfolk.
Saying she's a soldier.
To cover the Sandringham flower show, and at one point I wondered if I was hallucinating because of lack of sleep, I tell you. I couldn't quite believe it. Anyway, so Sandringham Flower Show, it's, if you'll pardon the pun, it's one of the big hardy annuals of the royal calendar. It was actually the last...
See what you did there?
Yeah, I know. Last big joint event normally for the King and Queen before they go up to Scotland for their summer break. And it's a really fun event. It's a kind of proper British countryside event. You have people there with their kind of wonky veg and their giant oversized marrows, and you have the Women's Institute bake sale. It's a really fabulous event, and you can see how delighted the King was to be there, because he'd missed it last year because of his cancer treatment. And part of it, they go around all these tents, and between them they shake hands with the crowd, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people there wanting to say hello and see how nice it was. And then I just did a double take, and this lovely gentleman, Phil Smith, I must give him a shout out, I just saw him kind of lift up his shorts and literally just put out his leg and show the Queen. She was in hysterics. I couldn't quite see what it was afterwards, so I went up to talk to him, and he's got four massive he's a super fan, this man, 4 massive tattoos up his leg, which are the royal ciphers. So it started with Queen Elizabeth II on his ankle, then he's got King Charles's royal cipher, Queen Camilla's royal cipher, but he's just had their joint royal cipher done on his outer thigh. Said it took an hour.
Blimey, let's not go any higher, please.
And I did wonder what would happen when Prince William becomes
still acres of flesh to go. Yeah.
He might just start on the other leg, we don't know. But it just shows you what a good sense of humour she had, and she roared, and hilariously she turned around and said, "See, it's catching on." I said, "What does she mean by that?" And she said, "Oh, one of my police officers has had a tattoo of a royal cipher done as well."
Really?
I don't know where it is. It could be leg, it could be somewhere else.
You've got to go back and get that information, please.
And so Phil was telling me that he actually writes to Camilla. He said, "I just always thought she was really great, big fan of the royal family." So he's been writing to her since before she married the King, and she replies to him. So as soon as she saw him, she recognised him. And he was like, "Look, I've gone that a little bit further, and I've had this one done now." She was in hysterics.
If you want the Queen's attention, get a tattoo. Are you tempted, Richard?
I'm not a great fan of tattoos, I must say, but I don't have any, no.
Okay.
But the viewers might be surprised to know that a few royals over the years have had tattoos, actually.
Very much.
Do tell.
Right back to the 19th century. There was a Prince Alfred who was visiting Japan, like Rebecca did last week, and while he was there, an artist came and did this whole dragon on his arm, a sort of writhing dragon. There's actually an interesting sort of sketch of it, and he kept that. But obviously men in those days, generally, particularly royals, would keep their shirts on, so no one really saw it after that. But I think that's the first sort of recorded royal tattoo.
I was thinking my little E, if I just added an R, I could have like an ER2.
Is that for Eden?
Yes, obviously. No, it's for my daughter Evie.
Oh.
Oh God, I've missed you lot. I really have actually.
I missed you.
I have to say, I've forgotten how much fun this could be sometimes.
But you didn't have a tattoo while you were in Japan?
No, although
Not a writhing dragon?
when I posted a picture of this man's leg on my social media yesterday, a few people I know, including my sisters, contacted me and said, "Oh, is that something you picked up in Tokyo?" I was like, "No," but I did. When I went up to this man, I didn't know whether the photographers had captured it, and I had to say to him, and the crowd were laughing, I said, "I'm not in the habit of going up to men and saying this, but can you lift up your shorts and let me take a picture of
We've
you?"
only got your word for that, Rebecca English. Yeah.
And he was game. He was like, "Whoop!"
Yeah, he was there. He was ready to get the legs out. Now, tell us, do any of our viewers have royal tattoos? As always, let us know in the comments, or you can email palace@mailplus.co.uk. Can't wait for the comments on that one. Now, to another striking image this week of an altogether different kind. A new portrait of Prince George was released. Rebecca, tell us all about this.
So, tradition for birthdays. Prince George turned 12 this week, so
Stop
happy
it.
birthday,
Surely
Prince George.
not.
I remember literally being crouched on my knees outside the hospital for what we called the Great Kate Wait, because he was actually late, like her first babies often are, and we were outside the hospital, I think, for about 2 weeks waiting. So it's unbelievable. He's about to turn 12, and obviously next year we'll be off to senior school. But it was a lovely photograph, and it was taken as part of a bigger set earlier on this year in Norfolk by Josh Skinner, who's one of the family's favourite portraits, and it just shows you how much he's growing up. It's lovely.
It really is.
And actually, there was, sorry to interrupt,
go.
there was a video that they released alongside it of the 3 children kind of playing as they did this photo call, and I think that was really touching because it just showed you what kind of happy young little kids they are.
They do seem to have a great relationship. I mean,
They do,
obviously most siblings do, but there seems very loving. Especially, I remember I was fighting all the time with my brothers when I was that age.
I get the impression that Prince Louis livens things up quite
Yeah.
a bit. That certainly sort of came across in the video.
Yeah, George and Charlotte were like carrying him, you know. And I do think they do get on well. I think it's very sweet to see.
Well, if you, we will have more similarly nice images in our montage at the end of the show, so do stick around for that. Now, Richard, George is turning 12. It's a bit of a seminal coming of age moment, isn't it? Because it means there's an interesting bit of royal protocol around travel that kicks in.
Yeah, this was something I discovered this week actually, and it came from a former pilot of Royal Helicopters. And he said that when Prince William reached the age of 12, he stopped travelling with his father. So they had separate flights, and obviously that's to sort of, guarantee the line of succession. So it'd be very interesting to see whether that's the case with George and William. Because obviously we know that they have flown together either in plane flights or helicopters or cars in the past.
Yeah, Rebecca, the family are known to travel together, as Richard says, cars, helicopters, private jets. Do you think that they will follow this protocol rule? And I'm also puzzled because if that is the protocol, well, surely that's the same whatever age the heir is.
Yeah, and I have to say I spoke to the palace this week and they were like, well, it's kind of news to us. So I get the impression that actually the family won't be changing their travel arrangements at all. So they will still travel as a family.
It's interesting you say that you hadn't heard that before. I remember being a kid and my father telling me about that as a bit of royal protocol. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, they don't like talking about kind of security, and they don't really like talking about travel arrangements.
No. And also, there's such a maudlin reason behind it. So,
but I have to say, I mean, it's not a very sort of tasteful discussion, but it's the future of our royal family, and I personally find it very worrying. Look, after the Wales family, we have Harry and Meghan.
I can see the panic rising on your face.
I'm sure this isn't true, but there were some rumours that Meghan had said something about, only one plane crash away from being on the throne or something. Look, I'm sure she didn't. It's a very tasteless comment, but the fact is that, Prince Harry and Meghan could be on the throne, and that's something which would be a threat, I would say, to the future of the monarchy. So it's something we should take very seriously, and come on, even though it's not great for the environment to have separate flights, please put George on a separate flight and a separate, particularly helicopters, which I don't like, from his father.
My understanding is that he would still be able to travel with his mother.
Yeah, but as I say, I don't think the family are planning to change their travel plans at all. I mean, maybe that after Richard's story they might do, but honestly, when I spoke to people this week, they were like, it's just not a thing as far as we're aware. So,
but Richard, we know the late Queen's thoughts, don't we, on this particular issue?
Well, yes, and William's father, King Charles. So King Charles, according to Robert Jobson in his book, expressed his concerns about, because not only do they travel together, but Prince William, who's a qualified helicopter pilot, actually flies the helicopter. And according to Robert Jobson's book, the King didn't like this. He didn't like William flying the whole family and urged him to stop. And it's something the Queen Elizabeth expressed her concerns about as well, because I think she was always keen to make sure that she did travel separately from the heir to the throne, Charles. So yeah, it is a matter of some importance, I would say.
I don't like helicopters. Anyway, let's move on. A quick word on a programme that got royal watchers in the UK excited this week and featured experts reading the lips of what the royals were saying. And Rebecca, there was a very sweet exchange between William and Catherine, wasn't there?
There was. I mean, Channel 5 programme, on one hand a little bit sneaky, but on the other hand utter genius.
Yeah.
Very, very clever idea. We often see lip readers employed on big occasions, but I think what was clever about this is they went through footage that you wouldn't normally expect to be looked at. So, and you obviously can hear some quite candid comments. And actually, the William and Catherine wedding moment was very sweet. And it was them towards the end of their wedding day. And basically, saying, Catherine saying to William, have you, enjoyed the day? And his face saying, oh, my face is aching from smiling so much, it's been perfect. And her saying to him, tell me you love me. And he said, always. And I have to say, I'm not very effusive when it comes to romantic pronouncements, but even I kind of was like, oh, that's sweet.
Oh, that's nice. But then, Richard, there was also a tense one from 2018 involving Harry and Meghan.
Yes, God, it was really interesting, this. I mean, you always think with lip readers, I mean, essentially they are guessing, aren't they? They're trying to work out what people say.
In an educated fashion. Yes.
Yeah, but they know what they're talking about. And this one, I think, was from a Remembrance Sunday Remembrance Service, I think. And it was back in 2018, and Meghan appeared to have said something along the lines of, you've got to take advantage of this situation, to Harry. You've got to do it tonight. So obviously it's not clear what they were talking about, but they did seem to be sort of plotting, let's say, about something. And it was something with some urgency.
Because Harry replies, you do know it'll be the end if we do that. And I think the timing is very, very significant. It really, I'm not prone to conspiracy theories, but it did sound quite menacing, I thought.
And it did sort of illustrate
if it's accurate.
If it's accurate, it did sort of illustrate what we've discussed before, that there were concerns from people who worked at the palace that Meghan's agenda was always to sort of take Harry back to America, and that she wasn't really trying to make a go of it, as a princess here.
What do we make of this as a new frontier, where suddenly I feel like we're going to see all the royals talking like this with things covering over their mouths, if they've got to watch every single thing that they're doing in public?
Well, we actually saw this in the programme, because Eugenie and Beatrice, they're quite wise to this. And when they were outside, I think it was St Paul's, after a service, when Harry and Meghan had come back, I think Harry was moaning about something, typically, that his dad not wanted to speak to him or something. Yes. And then I think it was Eugenie just said something completely like non-plus, just, oh yeah, whatever, she wasn't going to get drawn into it. And it's like you say, when we see footballers on the bench or whatever, they're always covering their mouths, and we see why.
Yeah, and obviously, politicians are always being told to cover up their notes when they walk into meetings because they don't want to see them. So I suppose this is the royal equivalent of it. But people regularly do it on big occasions, like on the balcony at Trooping the Colour and things like that. This I say, I think the Harry and Meghan comments were particularly illuminating on this.
Well, speaking of Harry and Meghan, we put a poll out last week in the new Palace Confidential newsletter asking whether you thought the King should hold peace talks with Prince Harry, as we debated in last week's programme. At the time of putting the show together, nearly 20,000 of you had voted. That's extraordinary. A substantial 74% said no, 12% said yes, while 14% said yes, but only if William is involved. And just a reminder that you can sign up to the free Royal newsletter by going to the link below or by using your phone camera to scan the QR code that you'll find on screen now. If you like this show, I'm sure you'll love the newsletter. And I'm also really keen to hear what Rebecca has to say about this, so we'll hear her thoughts after hearing some of your comments. So last week, our panel taste tested Meghan Markle's rosé. Can't believe I missed the week where there was wine.
Well, me too. I feel quite disappointed.
Feel
by
very
that.
cheated.
You didn't miss much, I can assure you.
Oh, well, we've only got your word for that. Well, Angelique had this to say. Great show. One of the best with the dueling duo. What fun with the wine tasting and Richard's expression. Loved it. And we also had a brilliant question from Betsy Clark, who said, hi, love this show. Thanks, Betsy. Question, if Prince William keeps William as his regnal name, which number will he be? Also, what is the reason for regnal names? It seems they've become less used and that women haven't used them. Thanks. Great question. Rebecca, what can you tell us?
Well, he'd be William V. Now, he could not be William V if he decided he wanted to change his name, and that's perfectly plausible, and that has happened in the past. In fact, there was a lot of speculation over the years that King Charles would become King George in honour of his grandfather. I have to say I never gave that any credence, and it didn't happen, but it's not unheard of, and I certainly haven't heard it about William, so he'll be King William V.
Interesting. Well, and as mentioned earlier, Richard released a new episode of Reading the Royals, and it's fair to say that the comments have been amazing. Like this one from Christine Alexander, who said, Richard, thank you so much for this dignified and kind report. I cannot imagine battling cancer as such a high-profile figure. I love Princess Catherine so much and I feel so sorry for her. I'm proud of William and the children and grateful that Almighty God healed them. May she and King Charles continue to recover fully. An LA American who said, so beautifully done. I cried through the whole program. As a cancer survivor myself, I just want to say thank you, Richard. Oh, that's got to feel good, right? That's really nice. And if you would like to watch that episode, it will play right after this. But it is emotional, so it does seem to have brought a lot of you to tears, so have the tissues ready. So please do keep your comments coming. We love reading them. If you need an idea of what to write, we are about to film a royal fashion special. So if you've got any questions about the gowns, tiaras, the shoes, your favourite royals wear, then comment down below. Okay, as promised, we'll get back on the so-called peace talks between the King's camp and Prince Harry's team. So as you said earlier, Rebecca, you didn't miss much while you were away. What did you make of it all, watching it from afar?
I hate big royal stories breaking and I can't
So
get involved. Yeah. I mean, I did a little bit, but, in terms of some of the post-story reporting, but, sometimes you've got to have time away with your family. Look, I know there's been
the way you said that.
Yes, you do.
Got to make that sacrifice sometimes.
Whether they say the same about me is another question. Look, I know there's been a lot of anger over this story, but I do have to put my journalistic hat on and say, look, it was, kudos to Mail on Sunday. It was a, what we call a marmalade dropper in this business, and it's the, the test of a good story is, will people put down their cup of coffee in the morning and read that story? And people have done in their droves. I think where people have slightly got off on the wrong track with the story is the description of it as being peace talks, and I think it may help a little bit to explain about why that is. When Harry and Meghan stormed out very acrimoniously from the royal family, there was still a line of communication between their people and the various palaces. I mean, I would say it was fairly arm's length WhatsApp messages, but there was a line of communications open because there were certain things that needed to be discussed at various times. Now that has petered out a lot in the last few years because obviously things have become so toxic because of Harry's really bitter, nasty and aggressive attacks on his family. But they've not entirely gone away. And my understanding of what's happened is they've got this new PR team in play, half in America and half in London. And the American team were coming over to meet the British team and also having a lot of meetings with charitable partners, but also sympathetic journalists they were meeting. I mean, you won't be surprised to class I was not classed as one of those, but they're having quite a series of meetings over here. So my understanding is that the request for a meeting actually came from the Sussexes people to Buckingham Palace to say, look, while we're here, would it be sensible for us to meet? And I think it was probably the right decision on the palace's behalf to do so, because better the devil you know, frankly.
And also it's a bit of a statement to say, no.
We're not going to meet you,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
because there will be, over the years, things that they have to discuss. That said, I think it's fair to say, as it's been described to me, there was considerable surprise and wry disappointment in palace circles that inevitably this meeting ended up being leaked. By who, we can only speculate. But
that little smirk, it was considerable surprise and weary resignation, but I'm loving the smirk on your face, because I know you have your theories.
Yeah, I mean, look, but I was discussing the story with someone who's not a journalist, who's not got any interest in royal stories when I was on holiday, and they were saying to me, well, surely it was probably a good thing it was leaked, because, well, at least now the Buckingham Palace know what they're dealing with, and that, even private meetings will become public. So, yeah, it's. I think that the feeling was that the fact it was publicised was unfortunate. I think the idea behind it was certainly, as regards Buckingham Palace, came from the best of intentions. Yeah. Whether it will change things moving forward is another question, because it does seem to me to be slightly self-destructive at the fact that this meeting has become public.
But let's mind the positives from it, because a lot of people are saying that surely the best thing for the monarchy is if things move forward in a much more sort of like happy tone.
Well, I think they want to be able to have sensible conversations about difficult issues when it's necessary to do so, and that inevitably means having some line of communication there. I think they will continue, rightly so, to be cautious given what's happened. But I think, as I say, the intentions were sound and sensible. What
do you make, Richard, of the whisperings that some have suggested this is paving the way for something big and good to happen around the Invictus Games in 2027, or which apparently coincides with Camilla's 80th birthday?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, so the next Invictus Games, they're in Britain, and it's the same month that Queen Camilla turns 80, which we know that's something the King would want to celebrate. And I do think it's interesting. You look at when they've had previous Invictus Games, I don't think they've been in July. It's very interesting that Harry, who's very much involved, and the organisers have chosen July for those games. So that's interesting in itself. But there's no doubt that Harry and Meghan are using these games, for injured former servicemen, to make moves back towards the royal family. I mean, we've seen a string of stories, and there was one the other day about how they were going to invite, or they have invited already, senior members of the royal family to attend the games. And that's already started to put pressure on the royal family, like 2 years ahead of the event. So I think it is significant, and I think it's going to be an interesting one to watch. But there's something as well, it's just slightly unpleasant using these very worthy event for injured former servicemen for a sort of PR type agenda. I'm really uneasy about it.
Is it using, or is it inviting members of Buckingham Palace to be associated with something that a lot of people really respect?
But again, you can do that in private, can't you? You don't necessarily need to let the world know that you've sent the invitations, and to do so 2 years ahead when we've had this string of other stories and then we've had these talks. It is hard not to see a bit of an agenda there.
I try not to be as cynical as Richard Eden, but sometimes he makes it hard. Let's stick with Harry and Meghan. There's a new report this week that suggests that when their Netflix deal comes to an end, that's it with the streaming giant. Rebecca, what do you make of this?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of these reports over the last year or so, and I feel like sometimes it varies from week to week. Some weeks you hear that the boss of Netflix thinks Meghan's a rock star and there's a great future. The next week you hear quite negative. This, however, I think has taken things up a slight notch, because we've seen a flurry of reports all around the same thing.
It's the cold hard numbers, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just saying, look, this has been a bit of a disappointment. There's going to be no massive ceremonial cutting of ties with them, but we're just going to let it peter out because it just hasn't really worked to anyone's favour. And because the reports are coming from well-sourced people in various different directions, and it's all variations on a theme, you've got to actually hand quite a great degree of credibility to them, I think.
I mean, I would say let's look at the facts rather than the speculation. And the facts here is Netflix released their list of the most watched programmes for the first 6 months of the year. Now,
why do they do that? Because inevitably people will concentrate on the ones that didn't do so well.
Well, I think that they want to highlight how popular their programmes are. You know, it's a huge worldwide broadcaster. And Meghan's With Love Meghan, the lifestyle programme, I mean, my goodness, it's had so much attention, so much hype. But that didn't really reflect in the viewing figures. It failed to make even the top 350 programmes in that 6 months. I think it was like 353 or something like that. But let's be frank, that's very unimpressive. But even more unimpressive.
Well, when you factor in her reach and how much attention it had, it's surprising.
It's definitely surprising.
Yeah.
But then even more unimpressive was Prince Harry's programme. They said to him, look, you've got the money, you make a sort of programme you want to make. So he made a programme about polo. And I remember watching it myself. Well, apparently it only gained, the whole series gained a total of 500,000 views. Well, to put that in perspective, you know, each episode of Palace Confidential sometimes gets 500,000.
Yeah,
so
where's our Netflix deal, Ted? Come on.
Yeah, I mean, definitely we should ask for a sort of pay rise. But that really does put it in perspective. I mean, this is Prince Harry. This was a £100 million deal or something they signed. So I think what's clear is any new deal that they have, it won't be anything like that.
And Richard, your colleague Alison Boshoff wrote a piece about their finances, Harry and Meghan, and that would suggest that they're going to need to find some money from somewhere to afford this incredible Montecito lifestyle somehow.
I know you call me cynical, but I do think, again, it's related to these sort of efforts to sort of mend fences back in Britain. Because, you know, when you look at the money, the outgoings and everything, as Alison Boshoff did, it really is astonishing. It's sort of thing to sort of send a shiver down your spine, because they've got such huge outgoings. And you can see why Prince Harry was so angry and bitter about security, because it costs so much. So they need millions, and they had those millions from Spotify, from Netflix. Spotify's gone, and Netflix, from all accounts, is drying up too. So, you know, I would have thought they're quite nervous.
Do you think? Yeah, I was going to. It sounds like they might even be panicking.
Well, we know that Meghan's made efforts to make money from the commerce stuff, but again, that's linked to Netflix. Netflix is involved in that. And it's been very small scale from what we've seen so far. So you wouldn't have thought that would make money.
I know that I can't possibly ever understand the lifestyles of the rich and famous, but why do they need to make that much money? Why can't they have an 8-bedroom house instead of a 16-bedroom? Do you know what I mean? Like, why? Is that just me? Am I just being very naive?
No, and I think this is why this is all such a salutary lesson, because I do think when they left the royal family and they had all of these offers coming in, because of course commercial organisations were absolutely enthralled with the idea that a member of arguably one of the most famous families in the world, who, you know, always have tried to scrupulously protect their privacy, suddenly going out and being there, you know, as a commercial property. That's never happened before. So obviously all of these streaming giants and podcast companies were desperate to get their hands on them. And I do think Harry and Meghan were almost drunk on the power of being able to do that. And then I think the trouble is that they have overstretched themselves by buying this great big mansion and estate and the lifestyle that comes with it on the basis of the promise of what they're being offered rather than the reality. I'm afraid, I mean, you're talking to someone very small time who only believes in spending what they earn. You know, I over the years I could have got a mortgage for a bigger house, but you know, we didn't, because we wanted to be able to have a holiday each year. You know, most people will base their lifestyles on that. Harry and Meghan haven't done that, and it's a very salutary lesson. But as Richard says, I'm not sure how they see a way out of this. I mean, Harry's got a couple of paying gigs now. He's still the Chief Impact Officer, a title of which I've never still quite worked out what that means, of the kind of therapy company Better Up. He's got his travel firm, but those are not things that will afford and pay for the kind of lifestyle that they've become used to. And you have to ask yourself, does that mean there could be another book in the offing? Or are they literally betting everything on the As Ever brand and the rosé and the jams and the teas, affording that lifestyle in the future? That's actually a big risk.
Stressful.
I mean, remember, if they stayed in the royal family, what they would have had. So you would have had all that security paid for by taxpayers. They would have had a home in Scotland, a home in London, a country home. All that would have come with their position. So they've chosen to give that up. And I think it might be slowly dawning on Harry and Meghan what they have lost.
Interesting. Well, to the late Queen now, and an exhibition that a lot of people have been waiting for, yours truly included. We're going to be seeing her outfits, aren't we, Rebecca?
I am super excited about this,
too.
really am. So the Royal Collection Trust, which is the charity that looks after all the incredible houses and paintings and antiques that the royal family hold on in trust on behalf of the nation, they've announced a big exhibition next year to mark the centenary of the birth of Queen Elizabeth II. It's going to run between spring and autumn in the King's Gallery, and it is going to be a tribute to Queen Elizabeth's fashion. There are going to be 200 items on display, over half of which I've never seen before, and they will cover everything from the items she wore to state banquets, to her visits around the world, to the flower shows and the horse trials in this country. It's going to be fantastic.
And I know that Rebecca will be one of the first through the door, so I'll be glomming onto your coattails.
You can definitely be my plus one for this. I mean, I've always said about Queen Elizabeth, people would often say, oh, she doesn't have much interest in fashion. But how many women in the world, or people in the world, could you identify from just seeing 3 items of their clothing? If you saw a hat, a handbag and the dress or the shoes, you would 100%. Know instantly that was Queen Elizabeth II.
And the corgis, come on.
And the corgis. They were a fashion item. She loved those. And I think that's an absolute testimony to her understanding that while she may not be massively interested in fashion, she understood the importance of it in her role as an international diplomat. And I, for one, cannot wait for this.
It's really going to be something. Well, a reminder to send us your fashion questions for a royal fashion episode that we're recording very soon. Fanfare, please. That's right, it's time for the unsung royal hero of the week, and it's an old favourite of ours. That's right, we're celebrating Princess Anne. Now, Richard, a report at the weekend suggested that her injuries in last year's accident at Gatcombe Park were worse than previously thought.
Yes, it's interesting, and that's something we've heard before, and I think that Anne has acknowledged herself that it was pretty serious, and we later learned she'd been in intensive care. But that whole incident has been sort of shrouded in mystery, partly because she was just found unconscious and nobody knew exactly what happened. Viewers might remember that at the time they said it was thought to have been kicked by a horse perhaps, but there was no horse near there, so it was all rather difficult. But yes, this report said she had been very badly injured, but nevertheless she's still working. This week other members of the royal family have gone on summer holidays, but she's still been working this week. She took another investiture on behalf of her brother, the King, this week, and I hope she will have a summer holiday at some point, and I'm sure she'll be probably on a boat, usually going to bag those lighthouses as she does.
Surely there are none left.
No, I think there are still some lighthouses she hasn't visited.
Some so good you've got to see again.
We hope she takes a summer holiday eventually.
Excellent. Well, Rebecca, there was also a bit of a message for William in there, wasn't there?
Well, talking of investitures, it was this is basically a report ahead of her 75th birthday in the Sunday Times, and it was just saying that while she loves her job and she doesn't plan to retire anytime soon, it was suggesting that maybe she felt William could take up the slack a bit on things like investitures, because he lives in Windsor and she's obviously got a home at Gatcombe Park and she's busy travelling around the country on engagements, and it just might be a bit easier for her nephew to do a few more engagements. I mean, talking back to the accident, you're right, it came quite a shock even to me when she went back to visit the hospital, that it emerged during that visit that she'd been in intensive care, because we weren't told that. And I took that up with Buckingham Palace as an issue at the time and said, if she was in intensive care, we should have been told. And I wrote a piece, I think last year, saying that very much the same thing, that the accident was far more serious than they let on, and the King had actually been very, very worried about his sister. And the fact that she took several weeks to recuperate before she came back to work, and when she did, she still had a very obvious black eye, and she admitted herself on several occasions. It really made her start to kind of think about her own mortality in a way. I think things like that don't they?
There was another very interesting line in that article that said that she plans to copy the example of her father, Prince Philip, and carry on working until she's 90. You might remember that Prince Philip finally retired, aged 90. Well, Princess Anne, that's her intention, is to wind down a little, I think.
I don't doubt it.
Wind down a little after the age of 80 and then retire at 90. So good luck to her.
And going back to William for a second, do you think that if, we all hope she's still going when he is the king, that she might be a bit of a traditional voice in his ear, a bit of guidance?
Yeah, and he has an enormous amount of respect for his aunt. I mean, when she came back to work, himself and Catherine did a rare social media post saying "Super Trooper," great to see the Princess Royal back in action, and that was quite unprecedented, and I think shows you the amount of obviously concern they had as a wider family, but also the respect they had for her. And actually, years ago, she gave a very interesting interview. I think it was around her 70th birthday maybe, that she said, she kind of highlighted her irritation slightly, the younger members of the royal family constantly wanting to reinvent the wheel. And she said, actually, we've been doing this job quite a long time, and I think we do it quite well, thank you very much, and that maybe it's also appropriate to
don't fix what ain't broke.
Look at years of experience, as well as coming up with kind of innovative ideas to move monarchy on. So
it's interesting. She was obviously, as you mentioned, it was a profile around her big 75th birthday, but she seemed to sort of take umbrage at the idea that it is a big birthday.
Well, that's just typical Anne, isn't it? I would recommend actually to the viewers, if they want to get a good insight into her relationship with William and Catherine, to watch that podcast that was recorded at Windsor, and it was all about rugby. With Mike Tyndall and the others. It was a great watch, really interesting relationship. But as you see, you can see from that Prince William and Catherine, they're close to Anne, but they're probably a little bit daunted as well by her.
As is everyone. I mean, I'll have quite a bit more news in the next couple of weeks on her 75th.
Such a tease.
Keep on reading the Mail and stay tuned to Palace Confidential.
Well, we know one thing they announced while you're on holiday was there's going to be a coin with Princess Anne on one side. And obviously the King's head on the other. Lovely. So that will be a great souvenir.
And actually, I can't think of anyone better actually to have in the royal family to have a coin dedicated to. I think it's about time too.
Great collector's item. Look out for that one. Well, speaking of big birthdays, when you're 12, it's always a big birthday. And as we mentioned earlier, this week was Prince George's 12th. And to mark it, we've created one of our world famous Palace Confidential montages. Happy birthday to His Royal Highness Prince George. Now, up next is more of Our Richard in a new moving episode of Reading the Royals, looking at Catherine's year in recovery. You can click here for that. More Reading the Royals coming next week too. It's just time now to say thanks to Rebecca, Richard, and to you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.